So that was an extraordinary amount of contact, frankly, in about a, whatever it was, a 2.5 month period, culminated in a speech. In fact, I went up to Washington to fly up to West Point on Air Force One for that speech, and to be in attendance for it. But then there'll be a period where you'll go maybe, you'll only see twice a month or something only, and that's still a great deal. Obviously Central Command, we're the smallest. We sometimes joke and say that Central Command is the smallest of the regional combatant commands, and if I had a map, I'll show it to you later with slides. I feel a little bit deprived, by the way, a 4-star general without PowerPoint. You've just violated my First Amendment rights. But when you see that, you'll see that Central Command is the smallest of the geographic combatant commands, but some of our staff will proudly note that we have the most problems, and so we do probably have the most contact with the president. I mean, not only is it Afghanistan and Pakistan, it's also obviously Iraq. We have Yemen, we have Iran, we have a whole basket of other issues there. That we have piracy, we have pretty much you name it, and it's to be found in Central Command. So we stay pretty active, and we participate a great deal in the interagency process. So actually, it's a surprise, because again, that's not the impression that those of us who are sort of rowing away get, frankly. I think if anything, the pace has picked up. Yes, right here.
Yes, over the past few weeks, there's been some sort of debate over your position about how the Israeli-Palestinian conflict relates to the broader conflict.
I appreciate you raising this, actually, because I've tried to set the record straight already. Some of this started, there was a blog that came out, and it said, and it had all 3 items in it were wrong, frankly. One is it said that I had included in my Unified Command Plan recommendation, every year or so we submit something called the Unified Command Plan recommendation. And typically the geographic combatant commanders look at their area, and then they look at the areas around it, and they say, well, gee, should we redraw the boundary? Should we do something like this? Well, every time that happens in the Central Command headquarters, they say, gosh, should we include more of South Asia? Should we get more into the Caucasus? Should we get the Seychelles back? I mean, there was one, the last one, was when we divested our Central Command, in fact, of Sudan, Somalia, Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Djibouti to African Command when it became the 6th Geographic Combatant Command. And typically there's a question, should we ask to have Israel and the Palestinian territories included? Because what goes on there obviously is of enormous interest to the rest of the Central Command area, which is the bulk of the Arab world. We did not, and so that was just flat wrong. It said that we did, and he had bad gouge, as a sailor would say, bad information. The second was that I sent something to the White House on this topic, which just is, I don't send things to the White House every now and then, but it's very rarely. It is literally only when the president, once or twice in a meeting, he has directly said, Dave, could you revisit for us how reconciliation went in Iraq and what the lessons of that might be for Afghanistan? We did that during the Afghan policy review, for example. And I hadn't sent it. That just was flat wrong as well. And then there's also been, I don't think it was in that one, but there's also been a statement that I made a statement to the Senate, which I did. There's a 56-page document that we submitted that has a statement in it that describes various factors that influence the strategic context in which we operate. And among those, we listed the Mideast peace process, and if there's progress or not progress, that has a great deal to do with the, again, the context within which we operate. And we noted in there that there is a perception at times that America sides with Israel and so forth. That is a perception. It is there. Again, I don't think that's disputable. But I think people inferred from what that said and took and then repeated it a couple of times, and bloggers picked it up and spun it. And that, I think that has been unhelpful, frankly. Also in those factors, obviously, is a whole bunch of extremist organizations, some of which, by the way, deny Israel's right to exist. There's a country that is has a nuclear program, whose president denies Israel, denies that the Holocaust took place. I mean, so again, we have all of the factors in there, but this is just one, and it was pulled out of this, again, 56-page document, which was not what I actually read to the Senate at all. My opening statement of the hearings had none of this in that. This is all just, again, setting the context, as I said, for the area in which we operate. And it had all of the different factors and challenges that we have. And, you know, progress or not in the Mideast peace process is a factor that influences what goes on in our area. So that's what we were trying to convey. Let me just go farther, though, and say that I thought that Secretary Clinton's speech the other day very clearly, I thought articulately, strongly, clearly conveyed obviously our policy, and that is a policy I strongly support. So I mean, I hope would just, I've tried to, I've actually called, in fact today I called the Chief of Defense Staff of Israel and said, hey Gabby, this is, you know, and I sent him, in fact, a blog by Max Boot of commentary that tried to set this straight as well. I think that he picked apart this whole thing as he typically does, and pretty astutely does. And because there's quite a bit of stuff flying around in the blogosphere, so that's what we've tried to, again, to put to rest if we could.
I mean, I guess one of the other things is just the idea that this perception of the U.S. being too reflexively pro-Israel ultimately puts U.S. lives at risk. And
I don't know. There's no mention of lives anywhere in there. It is not in that. I actually reread the statement on the way down here. I'm talking about the 56-page statement now, not my opening statement had none of this stuff in it at all. So to say that I, quote, said this, and then it's been quoted, I mean, op-ed guys have climbed on this and everything else, and because it was in a blog, it doesn't say that at all. I mean, it does make situations more challenging, or in particular for moderate leaders. I mean, if you go to the moderate leaders in the Arab world, they will tell you that the lack of progress in the Mideast peace process causes them problems, because their concern is that those who promote violence in Gaza and in the West Bank will claim that because there's no progress diplomatically, that, you know, the only way they get progress is through violence, and that's their concern. And that was really what we were trying to convey. It's why we support Senator Mitchell so much. I mean, we have invited Senator Mitchell to every single conference that I host for ambassadors or chiefs of defense staff or what have you, which we do about 3 times a year, because everyone is so keenly riveted on that particular issue, even though, again, it is not in our area. And as I said, it was not one that I asked to have included in our area. And we keep an eye on that. I mean, we need to know the atmospherics there, because there is a certain spillover effect, and that's, again, what we were trying to convey in that particular document. So, right behind you here.
Tonight you'll be taking questions and answering questions, and you said that you've been going to various events like this to keep in touch with the American people.
Mm-hmm.
I was just wondering if there are any questions that stick out in your mind that you've been answering again and again from people, if anything really sticks out.
Gosh. You know, they sort of go in sort of spurts, I think, really, and, you know, at certain times there'll be a keen interest in, you know, what happened with the elections in Iraq, what happened with, how's the campaign unfolding in Afghanistan. So again, I think it's just a bit more topical, and I would guess that the questions this time presumably would be about, again, how is the political tabulation, if you will, when do they declare the results in Iraq? You know, how do we see that shaping up? What are the implications of that for the drawdown of our forces there is typically a question that's on folks' minds right now. Right now we're on track, and we think we'll stay on track. We may reconfigure the force a bit.